I caught my wife cheating with my own boss. So I didn't just quit, I destroyed his reputation, and walked away to start over completely alone. The coffee was still in my hand when my life ended. Not figuratively. I was physically holding a paper cup from the cart on the second floor, walking toward the elevator, and when the doors opened and I stepped into the parking garage, 30 feet ahead of me was my wife. With my boss. Next to his gray SUV. And the coffee was still in my hand. I stood there for 11 seconds. I know it was 11 seconds because I counted them later. Not in the moment. In the moment I had no access to time. But afterward, when I kept replaying it the way you replay something that refuses to make sense, I counted. 11 seconds of standing there before Marcus looked up. 11 seconds of being a person whose life was still the life he thought he had. Then Marcus looked up. I put the coffee on the hood of someone else's car. Walked back to the elevator. Pressed lobby. Rode down. Drove home. I have not finished that coffee. In my head I am still standing in that garage holding a cup getting cold. 11 seconds. The last 11 seconds of being the man I thought I was. My name is Jordan Elliott. I am 34. I was married for 3 years to a woman named Celeste. I worked for 6 years under a man named Marcus Webb. I am going to tell you what I found, what I did with it, and what it cost everyone involved. No softening. No clean version. Because the clean version is only half the story. Let me tell you who Celeste was. Not who she was in that parking garage. Who she was before. She kept a small green notebook in her purse. I thought it was for work. It was not for work. I found out what it actually was 8 months into our relationship when she made a reservation at a restaurant I had mentioned once, casually, while driving past it 6 weeks earlier. I had said something like that place looks good. That was the entire conversation. 6 weeks later she had called ahead, researched the menu, made a reservation. The notebook was full of things I had said I wanted to do someday. Not things I had asked for. Things I had mentioned in passing. Trails I had heard about from coworkers. A bookstore in a neighborhood I had driven through once. Documentaries someone recommended at a party. She wrote them down and turned them into plans without making a production of it. Without asking for credit. She just listened in a way I did not know people listened, and then she acted on what she heard. She texted me on bad days without being told it was a bad day. She had noticed something in my voice the night before, and the next morning she sent, "Thinking of you today." 3 words. No explanation. Just proof that she had been paying attention when I did not know she was paying attention. She showed up. That is the thing I keep returning to. Not the performed kind of showing up. The quiet kind. The kind where you look around during the hard moment and she is already there and you cannot remember when she arrived because she got there before it got hard. I thought presence meant faithfulness. I was wrong about what presence proves in a person. Now let me tell you who Marcus Webb was. Marcus was 47. Regional Director of Operations. Married to Patricia. 2 kids in middle and high school. Patricia coached youth soccer on weekends and brought real food to every company event. The kind that required actual time. She once spent 20 minutes helping Celeste find a boutique for our anniversary dinner because she knew the neighborhood. Patricia knew nothing. I want to say that clearly. Marcus was good at his job. I will say that because it is true and because the truth matters even when it is inconvenient. Strategic. Calm under pressure. The kind of boss who made your work feel like it mattered because he treated it like it mattered. He was also the person who recommended me for a promotion 18 months before the parking garage. Wrote the memo himself. Called me into his office and said, "Jordan, you are the best operational mind I have. I want you moving up." I thanked him. I meant it. That memo was written 3 months after whatever was happening with Celeste had already started. I know the timeline because I went back through everything afterward. The first time Celeste mentioned Marcus casually in conversation was 11 months before the parking garage. The tone shift I did not recognize happened around month 7. The promotion memo was month 8. He recommended me for a promotion while sleeping with my wife. He sat across from me and talked about my future and my potential while conducting a completely separate conversation with Celeste about something else entirely. He looked me in the eye. He shook my hand. That is the thing about certain kinds of men. They build compartments. Very good walls between very different rooms. You do not know the other rooms exist until something falls and both rooms are visible at once. The parking garage was the walls coming down. I was not supposed to be there. Client meeting scheduled until 7 p.m. The client had a family situation. We rescheduled. I texted Celeste at 6:09, done early, heading home. She did not respond. I assumed gym. She went Wednesdays. I parked on level 3. Always level 3. 6 years of the same habit. Elevator opened. 30 feet ahead of me. Gray SUV. 2 people. 11 seconds. Marcus looked up and his face did something I have never seen before. It collapsed. All at once. The specific expression of a man who has been running a calculation for months and just realized the answer is catastrophically wrong. Celeste turned around when she saw his expression change. She looked at me. I looked at her. I put the coffee on the hood of the nearest car and walked back to the elevator. Press lobby. Rode down. Said nothing. Not to Marcus. Not to Celeste. Not to myself. Drove home. Went upstairs. Sat in the leather chair in the living room. Waited. The leather chair. I bought it 9 years ago from a man named Roy who was moving and could not take it with him. Brown leather. Worn at the armrests. $60. It has been in every apartment I have lived in since I was 25. The chair I sat in when I found out my father was sick. The chair I sat in the night before I started the job where I would eventually meet Marcus. The chair where I read the first book Celeste recommended, the night I understood she was someone I wanted to keep knowing. I sat in that chair for 2 hours and 40 minutes before Celeste came home. I want to tell you I was planning in those hours. Building the precise response that came afterward. I was not planning. I was sitting with my hands pressed flat against worn leather armrests and my eyes on the wall and something in my chest doing something I did not have a word for. Not pain exactly. Not anger. Something underneath both. A low structural vibration. Like a building that has taken damage and is still standing but is not the same building. My hands were shaking. The internal kind. The kind your body does when it is processing something the brain has not caught up to yet. I pressed my palms into the armrests. 40 minutes until the shaking stopped. Then I sat for another 2 hours. When Celeste came through the door and turned on the lamp and saw me sitting in the dark, she stopped. She knew. Of course she knew. She had seen me in that garage. But there is a difference between preparing for something and arriving at it. I said, "Sit down." She sat on the couch. I said, "How long?" She said, "Jordan." I said, "How long?" She looked at her hands. Then she said, 8 months. 8 months. I pressed my palms into the armrests again. 8 months of dinners. 8 months of the same bed. 8 months of the green notebook and the 3-word texts and the quiet showing up. 8 months of a surface so intact I never looked for a crack because I did not know there was something underneath the surface to crack over. I said, "Why?" She talked for 7 minutes. Distance she had felt. A loneliness she did not know how to name. Marcus being present in a way she had needed and had not known how to ask me for. I said, "Give me the specific moment. Not the feeling. The moment." She could not. She gave me atmosphere. The general shape of something without the substance of a moment. I said, "I need you to leave tonight. I need the apartment." She said, "Jordan, please." I said, "I am not going to yell. I am not going to do anything. I need you to leave and not contact me tonight." She left. I sat in the leather chair until 2:47 a.m. Not planning. Not crying. Pressing my palms into $60 leather. Waiting for whatever was vibrating inside me to stop. I went to work the next morning. Because I had thought of something in those 2:47 a.m. hours and the thing I thought of required the building. Marcus had a standing 9 a.m. Thursday call he took from his car. Never at his desk before 9:45. I had 90 minutes. In 6 years I had accumulated access. Not because I abused it. Because I was trusted. The best operational mind he had. He said so in a memo. And trust in an operational role means access to rooms most people at your level never enter. I used 90 minutes of that access. What I found was not what I went looking for. I went looking for confirmation of something personal. What I found instead were emails. Between Marcus and a contact named Derek Osei at a logistics company we had been pursuing for 14 months. A commission arrangement that did not appear in any official record. Payments routed through a consulting entity registered under a name I did not recognize. Invoice language carefully constructed to look like legitimate vendor expenses. $340,000. Over 22 months. Hidden in plain sight inside a system I knew better than almost anyone at the firm. Not an affair. A fraud. I copied everything to a personal drive. Logged out. Went to my desk. Marcus came in at 9:47. Walked past my office. Paused at the door. Said, "Good morning, Jordan." I said, "Good morning." He walked on. Last normal conversation we ever had. I worked a full Thursday. Answered emails. Attended a 2 p.m. call. Did not look at his office. Did not think about Celeste. Did my job the way I had done it for 6 years. At 5:30 I shut down my computer and drove to see an attorney. Gerald Finch. Employment law. Whistleblower cases. A friend of a friend had used him and said, "If you need someone who will not blink, call Gerald." We met at 6:15. I described what I found. He asked precise questions. The kind that told me he had done this before. He said, "This is actionable. Fiduciary duty violation at minimum. Possibly wire fraud depending on the client relationship." I said, "What protects me?" He said, Reporting through proper channels before anyone has reason to claim personal motive. I said, I have a personal motive. He did not flinch. He said, does the fraud exist independent of your personal situation? I said, yes. It existed before I knew about the parking garage. He said, then report the fraud. What happened in your marriage is a separate matter. Keep them completely separate. In writing, in conversation, in your own head. I said, understood. He said, how are you doing? Letter to HR at 9:02 a.m. Personal reasons. Thank you for 6 years. Nothing that indicated anything. At 10:47 a.m. I submitted a formal written complaint to the board of directors. Documented. Every email. Every transaction. Every date and amount. Gerald had reviewed every sentence. At 1:30 p.m. a separate letter to Derek Osei. Factual. Documentation enclosed. Suggested he review with his own legal counsel. At 4:15 p.m. I cleared my desk. The photo of Celeste that had been there for 3 years. I put it in the box face down. Not dramatically. Practically. I was not going to leave it for someone else to wonder about. I carried the box to my car. I drove out of that parking garage for the last time. Level 3. 6 years of the same spot. I did not look at the space near the gray SUV. The board engaged outside counsel within 10 days. I was interviewed once. 43 minutes by phone. I answered every question factually. Did not mention Celeste. Did not mention the parking garage. Described what I found, how I found it, why I reported it. Week 3, Marcus placed on administrative leave. Week 7, outside counsel expanded the scope. Derek Osei's company had retained their own attorneys. The $340,000 was not the total. Week 9, Marcus Webb terminated. Week 11, civil claims filed. I found out most of this through Gerald and through a former colleague named Priya who kept me loosely updated. I did not follow it obsessively. I had decided that watching the process was not going to help me build what came next. What I know is the result. Marcus Webb at 47 lost his job. Lost his professional standing in an industry where reputation is currency. Is currently in litigation that will take years and money he does not have. His marriage did not survive the investigation. Patricia found out about Celeste during the proceedings. Apparently there had been others before Celeste. The investigation surfaced correspondence that made that clear. Patricia left. Took the kids. Relocated. I thought about Patricia for a long time when I heard that. She brought homemade food to company events. She helped Celeste find a boutique for our anniversary. She coached soccer on weekends and did not know that the man she drove home from those games was conducting a completely different life inside his compartments. She deserved better. Her kids deserved better. So did I. 3 separate true things. Celeste and I tried. Because the clean version of this story is not the true version and I need to tell the true version. She came back the night after I asked her to leave. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table and I told her I had not decided anything yet. I said, I do not know if this is over. I know it is broken. I know 8 months of lying is not something that unhappens. But I am not going to make a permanent decision from a parking garage. She said, I will answer everything. First question, did you love him? Long silence. Then she said, I thought I did. I do not know now if what I felt was love or if it was the feeling of being seen in a particular moment by a particular person and confusing that for something larger. I genuinely do not know the difference anymore. More honest than I expected. It did not help. But it was honest. Second question, did you want to leave the marriage? She said, no. Never. I wanted both things at once and I told myself that was manageable and I was wrong and I knew I was wrong and I kept going anyway. I said, that is the thing I cannot get past. Not the 8 months. The continuing. Knowing it was wrong and not stopping. Every dinner. Every morning. Every text you sent me saying thinking of you. She said, I know. We tried for 4 months. Therapy twice a week. A therapist named Dr. Okafor who asked questions neither of us enjoyed answering. Long conversations at the kitchen table on nights when we had run out of easier things to say. There were real moments. Moments where I looked at her across the kitchen and saw the woman with the green notebook and I thought, maybe the foundation is still there. And then there were the other moments. 3 months into trying I drove past the building. Not on purpose. I was running an errand and took a wrong turn and by the time I corrected it I was on the street that runs alongside the parking garage. Level 3 is partially visible from that street. Just the edge. Concrete barrier. Fluorescent lights. I pulled over. I sat there for 23 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I stopped and again when I drove away. I cannot tell you what I was doing in those 23 minutes. Not thinking anything specific. Not crying. Not planning. Just looking at the edge of a parking garage the way you look at the site of something that changed everything. Not because looking does anything. Because the looking is the only thing that feels true. My hands started shaking. The same low internal vibration from the leather chair. The building has taken damage kind. I called Darius. College friend. Chicago. One of 3 people I had told about the parking garage. He answered second ring. I said nothing for 5 seconds. He said, "Where are you?" I said, "I pulled over outside the garage." "The one where?" He said, "Go home, Jordan." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Right now. Go home and sit in your chair. I will call you in an hour." I drove home. Sat in the leather chair. He called in 58 minutes. We talked until midnight. He did not give advice. Did not ask questions. Just stayed on the line and talked about ordinary things and let me be on the other end, not being alone. That night I understood something. The clean version of this story ended the moment I pulled over outside the garage. The true version had been running underneath the whole time. The true version includes 23 minutes on a roadside looking at concrete. Hands that took 40 minutes to stop shaking. A man sitting in a leather chair at 2:47 a.m. pressing his palms into worn armrests. That is the true version. That is the one worth telling. I told Celeste on a Sunday morning. Coffee made. She was at the kitchen table. Sunlight through the window the way it comes on Sunday mornings in that apartment. I sat across from her. I said, "I have my answer." She looked at me. Did not ask what the question had been. I said, "I cannot do this." Not cold. Not surgical. Just honest. The kind that comes after 4 months of trying and 23 minutes on a roadside and phone calls until midnight. She said, "I know." I said, "You knew before I did." She said, "Yes. I think I did." I said, "Why did you let me try if you already knew?" She said, "Because I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to sit here long enough that you would look at me and see me instead of that parking garage. I needed to know we had really tried. That it was not something that could have been saved if only we had worked harder." She said, "You never stopped seeing the parking garage." I said, "No." She said, "I know." We sat in that kitchen for a long time. The coffee cooled. The sunlight moved. Then she said, "I am sorry, Jordan. For all of it. For the 8 months in the parking garage and the 23 minutes on that road that I caused without knowing you were there. For the 2:47 a.m.s. For all of it." I said, "I know you are. I believe that." It did not change what was true. That is the thing about sorry. It is real. It counts. And it changes absolutely nothing about what was lost. The loss is still there on the other side of sorry. Always. We split what was fair. She kept the apartment. I took the leather chair. I was not leaving that chair. Here is what starting over actually looks like. Not the version with a soundtrack. The actual version. A smaller apartment in a different city. Furniture from a second-hand shop because I was not ready to choose things that were supposed to be right. A job lateral on paper and more interesting in practice. A team of 6 people whose names I am still learning the full shapes of. The leather chair by the window. Darius visited 6 weeks after I moved. Sat on the second-hand couch and looked at the chair and said, "That chair has been through it." I said, "It has." He said, "It looks like it held." I said, "It did." He said, "So did you." I did not answer that. Surviving something and being okay are 2 different coordinates and I was still figuring out which one I was at. I sat in the leather chair after he left. The apartment quiet in the way a place is quiet when it has no history yet. Not empty. Just unwritten. I sat there for a while. Not pressing my palms into the armrests. Not waiting for something to stop. Just sitting. Marcus Webb is in civil litigation. Patricia is in another city building something without him. Celeste is in the apartment we shared, green notebook in her purse, listening to someone the way she listens to people, writing down things they say they want to do someday. I hope whoever they are, they deserve it. That is the most honest thing I have said in this entire account. Not bitterness. Clarity. The kind that comes after 11 seconds in a parking garage and 40 minutes of shaking hands and 23 minutes on a roadside and 4 months of trying and one Sunday morning when the coffee cooled and the sunlight moved and I finally said what was true. Compartments fail. That is the lesson Marcus Webb paid $340,000 worth of fraud and a marriage and a career to teach me. You can build very good walls between very different rooms. You can maintain them for months. But eventually something steps out of an elevator at 6:14 p.m. that you did not plan for and the load exceeds the design and the walls come down and both rooms are visible at once. He built compartments. I walked into the space where they used to be. There is a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. I go Saturday mornings. Window seat. The staff holds it now without being asked. Last Saturday I sat there for 2 hours. Read. Watch the street. Let the morning be what it was. At some point I picked up my coffee. Still warm. I finished it. I thought about 11 seconds. A green notebook. A gray SUV. A leather chair that costs $60 and has held through everything I have asked it to hold. I thought about what gets built in a quiet apartment that has no history yet. Not rebuilt. Built. On ground that has been tested. Ground that knows what collapse feels like and is still ground. Marcus Webb is explaining himself to lawyers. Patricia is learning what her life feels like without the weight of compartments. Celeste is listening to someone new. And I am in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning 2 blocks from a leather chair by a window. Finishing what I started. That is what starting over actually is. Not a clean slate. Not a new man. A warm cup. A chair that held. And 11 seconds I will carry the rest of my life. Not because they broke me. Because they are the last seconds of who I was before I became whoever I am now. 11 seconds. Then the elevator. Then the lobby. Then home. Then everything after.